Thanks. I've been involved with residency centers since 1975 when I established a small residency center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I believe that was the first one in the southwestern United States. I've always believed and been devoted to providing direct support to artists. In the United States, this has been a challenging process. For those of you who know the history of funding on a federal level, direct grants to artists ended in the 1990s over issues of censorship when 4 artists had their grants taken away from them. They sued the government, they got them back, but it finally ended up in the Senate denouncing these artists who were currently working at my art center, and there was a vote that ended direct support to artists. So we're clever people, and we found another way to do it, and that's through artist residencies. Artist residencies are a field that began in the 1800s, 1900s. Usually a wealthy individual would set up a country retreat, but it's important to note that it wasn't a retreat from the way the world was as a kind of difficult industrial environment. It was moving towards a new way of living. So these were very proactive experiences. I want to run a PowerPoint only because it's got images that I think are interesting and show you the I'm going to show you what some residencies are like. And how do I? F5. There we go. All right, the Alliance of Artist Communities is an association here in the United States that was set up to create an association for what's now up to 400 artist residencies in the United States, which is an enormous amount that has grown substantially since the 1960s. There are also 1,200 artist residencies worldwide. I have visited probably about half of them. I don't have to read this, but residencies come in all shapes and sizes. Artists come to do their work. In some cases, it's because they really want to produce work for a show. Other cases, they simply want to experiment. In other cases, they just need time and space to chill out. And the buildings are all quite different, anywhere from a one-cabin, well, like in Bear Island, Iceland. The Taipei Artist Village is a very wonderful urban residency, and I just spent the last month of June in Camac, France, doing a project. At some of them you eat together, some of you don't. There are all kinds of communal settings. The point is that these are all set up for artists to have time and space to do their work. And artists of all kinds, all disciplines, and I would rather call these creative communities than artist residencies at these points. You have a confluence of thinkers, philosophers, scientists, writers, art and visual artists, performing artists, often in these same environments where they're sharing knowledge and doing their work in a safe space. And by safe space, I mean a place where you can really experiment, you can fail, which is essential in the creative process, but fail out of sight of your public, or critics that might really damage your career if they see something that's really not quite ready. Also, a lot of work is never meant to be presented in a way. It's a continuum of an experiment or investigation. And what's important is how it's documented and whether the ideas matter, and then how they're distributed. So many residencies, particularly ones that are involved with social media, are constantly looking for just innovative strategies to make creative platforms for artists so what they're doing and their ideas can get out to all of you. And that's something that's a real concern right now in the artist residency field. One thing I'd also like to say is funding for the arts has always been difficult, and this is no secret. In the 1960s, 70s, and even early 80s, there was a strong movement that produced nonprofit presenting spaces, galleries, theaters, stages. Many of these have failed and closed because the finances would not support them, whereas the artist residency field has sort of taken off and taken the place of the presenting arena, which was contracting. It's an interesting development. It allows artists to continue their work, and while they're not always able to present it in public, they're certainly able to continue and develop it. You know, we have different levels or gradations of artist support in this country, from the high, like this institution we're in, which is a very responsive one, to art centers that may have a budget of a couple of $1 million and have a more formal program, to artists' alternative spaces. I was at one today. What was the name of where we were?
Anchorage Community Works.
Anchorage Community Works. If you don't know it, it's a very cool place, and you should go down one night and see what they're doing. But that's a true artist-driven space, and it's where artists really take matters into their own hands and do their work and have a way of distributing it. Anyway, what you're seeing and what I'm flicking through are photos of some of the 400 artist residencies in the United States. They attract anywhere from emerging artists to mature artists who have, very distinguished careers. And again, it's a way for artists to gather themselves and produce ideas and work. What's interesting, what we're doing here in Alaska, and it's a unique program of having artists from Alaska going down to the lower 48 and artists from the lower 48 coming up to Alaska. As Jason said, it's a continuation of a program that was begun about 6 years ago with a group called United States Artists, which was funded by the Rasmuson Foundation. And now the Rasmuson Foundation is really taking an interesting leap into this area by running a program itself. It is making grants to organizations, but it's very hands-on in terms of the management of the overall program, so it will have some degree of excellence. We have here on stage today two groups of people who've been in the current program, that the Rasmuson Artist Residency program. Julie Decker and Marek Ranis are involved in an extremely interesting project called the Northern Initiative, which I'm going to let Julie describe. But I would say that this residency, it's one that's embedded within an institution. It's not like Margot Knight's Jurassic, which is a standalone facility in the Santa Cruz Mountains that is just an artist residency. But I think the artist residency program is fairly important now to the museum. So Julia, why don't you describe how you came to have Marek in your presence and the process you went through in accepting him and what you're doing.
Okay, well, we were pleased to accept Marek into our presence. So last year we launched our Northern Initiative, which it may seem obvious that a Northern institution would have a Northern focus, but it's an interesting time to be in the North, and it is what makes our institution distinct, is the place we are and the place we live. What we want to do through the program is make international connections with our circumpolar North neighbors and other places, using the environment and discussions about climate change and what's next in the North as an excuse to do so. We are an encyclopedic institution, so we work with scholars in science, history, culture, and we think it makes sense to work with artists as scholars as well. So what we were interested in is bringing artists in as researchers to provide a narrative for the North with Northerners and with people who come here to engage with the North in other ways. Marek is part of a group of 5 artists we brought in this year, artists from Finland, Denmark, Seattle, Detroit. And Marek comes to us through the Rasmussen's program, which meant we were paired with the McCall Center, in Charlotte, North Carolina. They gave us a slate of artists, understanding that we were interested in somebody who had great skills in critical thinking, a fair amount of independence in terms of research, and would come into this very experimental framework. Merrick was one of those artists that was put forward, and I think I knew instantly that he was the one that I'd like to bring to work with us at the museum. And so we offered this very loose framework. We said, can you come and not think of being in residence at the Anchorage Museum, although we wanted to offer our institution as a resource in terms of our staff and our collections and our archives and any connections we can make to Arctic researchers. But think of yourself as a resident in the Arctic. So we organized a program where we'll support Merrick and other artists in their research for at least a year, hopefully beyond that, hopefully into 3 years, and follow their research, work with them on the questions that arise as they start to investigate the North. And for Merrick, it's a continuation of questions that he had already started investigating in places like Greenland and Iceland before he came here. I just also, before I pass the microphone, wanted to acknowledge that the risk that that an artist takes in coming into a program like this. It's very loose. They're leaving their home, their job, their family, their dog for 2 months to come to a place that's remote, removed, and we said, we're here, let us know what you need, but otherwise, here are these forums you can engage in, here are some people you can talk to, here are some places you can go. And I think to Merrick's credit, he took full ownership of that and took full advantage of that, and I think it takes a particular kind of individual to make the most of it.
Well, I want to echo what Julie just said. Residencies, while they're a real gift to the artist, they often don't cover the artist's expenses back home. The artist is making a real commitment to a particular project or to just their own process of creativity, which is something essential they need to follow. Mark, maybe you could describe a bit some of the research and experiences you had here with the museum. I know you also did some traveling, but give us an overview of what your project is.
Thank you, and thank you, Julie, for giving me such a tremendous credit. On some level, I feel that Charlotte may be much more removed place than Anchorage. Charlotte is North Carolina, east coast of the United States. I work on the project which I called Albedo, which is focusing on Arctic issues and climate change since 2004. So my presence here is in some level continuation of my long-term interest in issues. And over the years, my project evolved, and my understanding, my knowledge also kind of, I hope, grew. My initial interest in coming to Anchorage was, I was pretty much focusing on the climate refugees issue, which is well-known and publicized issue in the state of Alaska, but also all over the world. So I was interested in this. The opportunities I was given to actually participate in a number of conferences and my travels in Alaska and also travels to Iceland during those 2 months expanded my understanding of the subject and also allowed me to have a much bigger, much more interesting interest in talking about the future development, energy development, actually not future, the present development, energy development in Arctic and how this will impact indigenous communities, how it will actually impact this state, but not only. So through my travels and interviews, I'm working on a kind of semi-documentary. I am still collecting the material, which is allowing me to kind of expand my understanding of kind of gray area between the attractiveness of energy development and jobs and economical development, but also the risk which will automatically carry would be actually presented by those issues. So those 2 months, I felt that were I'm just scratching the surface. I was able to collect a lot of information materials, but I'm hoping that next couple of years will really expand my knowledge and my understanding. I was able to produce body of work here at the museum using existing collection. I was able to work on additional project, which I called, which is part of international project called Ephemeral Coast, and that's also part of my interest in Arctic because the coastline in Arctic is changing, but all over the world is changing due to the rising level of the water. So it was extremely productive time, and also the time when I think I grew as an individual in terms of my knowledge and my appreciation of complexity of the issues I was trying to explore.
Also, if anyone has questions, just raise your hand throughout. We don't have to wait till the end. So just throw your hand up and we'll acknowledge you and get the question answered. Julie, I'm curious how you arrived at the Northern Initiative as a project or a thematic project that the museum wanted to undertake.
Well, I think we live in an interesting time in the North, a time when there are people coming from around the world to look at Northern issues as the place that tells the true story of climate change, that is the tipping point for what happens in our ecological future and in development in a number of ways. It's a place where change is most evident. We tend to invite outsiders in to become the narrators for that story, send them back out to become our voice. But I think it's important for us to have our own voice and to facilitate a discussion around those issues, to use our resources and our collections to talk about the Arctic and talk about the place we live. We have long been an importer of ideas, exhibitions, programs, which is great. It's good to bring the best of the world here to Alaska, but it's also important to have our own strong voice and our own narrative that we export and that we celebrate. I also think as there's our own perception of ourselves as limited by the place we live in, and this is to say, let's celebrate the place we are. It's an interesting, dynamic, connected place, and a place like no other. So it's turning the page and looking forward.
I mean, I'm excited what you're doing. You're the brand new CEO of the museum, and you're obviously a progressive activist director. And museums should be this way. They're community centers. They should be alive. The people who come in here should not just be passive viewers, but they should ultimately be drawn in as participants of a hub of knowledge and artistic creation, and something that you all would share in. So I applaud what you're doing. Is this the first residency of this type that you've done? Okay, so Marek, coming into something like this, have you done residencies like this before? And especially, if not, or if you have, what made this one distinct, particularly being in Alaska?
Well, I over the years have a chance to participate in a number of residencies. Some of them are really short. Some of them, actually, I was resident for at one place for 9 years. Yes. Coming here was directly related to my work and my research. So it wasn't really for me a time and space to focus on my work in a kind of abstract place. I don't have connection, but it was very much important to be here and use the resources I was offered here at the museum, which was tremendous. I'm talking about people who were willing to spend time with me to share the research and using the collection for my project and a number of things, including travels. So also the other aspect of this in comparison to other residencies is that I was given tremendous freedom and I was trusted. So I was given this amazing playground and time and resources, and it was up to me how I'm going to use it. It's slightly different sometimes when one goes to art residency. There is a organized schedule, other artists working next to you. This is the place when I felt like I was trusted, I was invited, and I have to measure up to this trust. So I think it's like a very good French expression, noblesse oblige. So I felt obligated to measure up to these expectations and also the trust, and I've always felt and still feel honored to be here.
I'm going to turn to Margot and Arlisha in a second, but I wanted to ask you one more question just for this moment. Most people who go to art centers or galleries or museums don't realize the amount of research that often goes behind what ends up as some kind of object, whether it's a film or a sculpture, an installation that they're presented with. You do a tremendous amount of research, and based on the Northern Initiative and what you're doing, what might people expect to see along the way in terms of different outputs that you may achieve? I know you're a sculptor, I know you've done various things, but how will the public share and benefit from all of your research?
On the formal level, I think it will be probably numerous of body of work. I finished the photographic series, which I'm hoping to actually physically produce in the next few months. I'm working on the film right now. I call this project right now Arctic Utopia. So I already bought all possible Arctic Utopia's domains. there are no more nets or comms. I own them. So I'm assuming that automatically there will be a website. I feel like I'm pretty lucky because of the material I was able to collect will allow me to experiment and find the best language. I don't have a specific medium, so I usually find the language which will kind of responding to the content, to the idea. That's in short.
Okay. Let me swing over here, and I have a question. Are there two mics? You have it. Okay, good. Smart. I was wondering where it went. And where were you in residence for 9 years?
I was resident at the Beckler Art Center, which doesn't exist anymore because it became a Beckler Museum of Modern Art in Charlotte, North Carolina.
So you're the guest who came, stayed, never left, you know. Okay. All right. I guess that's another story. I want to introduce Margot Knight, who's the director of the Jurassic Residency Center in California. Arlisha Jones, who's going to be artist in residence there. Which months?
September to November.
Of 2014. So this is an Alaskan artist going down to the lower 48 to a retreat center. And I'm going to let Margot explain what a retreat center really means right now.
I was thinking about this, and maybe it's my alliterative brain, but a retreat center, a residency, is for me, and the way the values express themselves at Jurassic, is a place to relax, a place to reflect, a place to reside. And because art is such a recursive process that always builds on itself, the structure that we have at Jurassic fits all of those values. We have a place where artists all come together and leave together for 30-day periods. Arlisha will be an exception because she'll be with us for 2 30-day periods, and I've told her she has to pretend with the second group like she's never been there before. But all artists come and leave at the same time. They live communally. Every month there's a choreographer, a composer, 3 sculptors or filmmakers or painters, visual artists, and 6 or 7 playwrights, poets, nonfiction writers of various places. Over the 34 years that we've been in existence, we have provided residencies to over 1,600 artists, 2,100 residencies. And we ask nothing of them. The poet Alberto Rios calls artists the work that no one knew needed to be done. So we're pretty committed to the fact that we give scientists speakers and labs, and we give athletes coaches and gyms, and we believe that we should give the gift of time to artists so that they can explore ideas. So we ask artists to come, to be open to the experience of the process, so that a visual artist learns about a choreographer, learns about a composer, and that they be open to listening to themselves. I tell them at orientation, your job while you're here is just to be. We provide a very safe environment for that. We have 583 acres. It's a private enclave with a locked gate. The artists never see anyone on property they don't know. And we have a chef who feeds them dinner 5 nights a week and buys all the food that they need. And in that way, over the past 34 years, artists from 50 different countries and 49 states, I think Arkansas is still our one holdout, have what we've come to call the Jurassic magic. We can't really put it in a bottle. We can't predict what's going to happen, but creativity reigns supreme at Jurassic because we trust artists, and that's our core value. We trust artists. Can I pass it to Arlisha?
Well, yeah, what I'd like to do is, Arlisha, I mean, you have not been to Jurassic, you've only seen these majestic images. Why did you apply for this residency? What are your hopes right now as an artist to have 2 months in a community where you're going to have a fair amount of isolated time?
That right there, the isolated time. I live here and work in Anchorage, and I know so many people. And you just said a word, too, of relax. And I've been at this for 20 years writing. I worked full-time until I got the Rasmuson grant. And I was able to take some time off now, finally, these 4 consecutive months right now. So to be able to go somewhere where I have time, where I can actually think about relaxing. And even now, I have 4 months off work, and I make myself be in my office for 6 hours a day. And if I don't make that 6 hours, I'm guilty. Oh my God, I got to get up and spend 7 hours, So I really have never had time in my life to just be Arlisha Jones, artist. I've been something else always. Right. And I'm overcome now. I've watched this movie twice now, and I've got tears, and I know I'm among artists, so deal with it. This is such a profound change in my life, and it is my first residency.
I've had several residencies myself. One was a retreat residency at the McDowell Colony. One that was kind of more socially engaged, which was at Camac, France, where I was involved with working with people who are adjacent to a nuclear power plant, and then another one at the Irish Museum of Modern Art, where you had to have your studio door open and anyone who wandered in could. And, so it's interesting. And I agree with you. It's the time where artists, so often this does not happen, but get to really say, yeah, I fully identify with my identity as an artist. It's a spiritual pursuit. When you go down to Jurassic, Margot, how do you give some kind of orientation or really make artists feel welcome who are coming to a different environment, many from different places, and it's really in a way up to you to set the stage for them to have a successful residency?
All the artists arrive on Tuesdays. They all leave on a Wednesday. On their first Wednesday when they arrive, I see 12 souls, none of whom have met one another, from far-flung corners of the globe, and we make selections for the year all at once. So we are curating every month to have the most diverse group we can, because we think that improves the experience in terms of career stage, ethnicity, national origin, age, any way you can slice and dice people. We want the most diverse group we can get. So the orientation is in the big barn that you saw, which was a former cattle ranch. And we watch everybody tentatively get to know each other. We ask them to introduce themselves to one another. And we talk, and we ask them to say, well, what do you plan while you're going to be here? And there's grand plans. Oh, I'm going to choreograph 6 dances. I'm going to do this. And I go, just breathe. Just give yourself, relax a little bit, and let the place speak to you. I mean, there's 60 sculptures out of 119 that have been created and left on the property. Just get a sense of who you are, listen to yourself, and get to know your fellow artist. So we walk them through the fire alarm. It's a very dangerous place, actually, also, because it's a level 10 fire protection district. We walk them through the survival manual and talk about the snakes and the mountain lions and the ticks, which are the most dangerous animal on the property. But then in the first week to 10 days, on Wednesday and Friday nights, they share their work with one another. No more than 20 minutes. We're very keen on the time. And we see them start to open up to one another. And from the beginning of this tentative group, each group gets its own personality. There's the loud group, the quiet groups, the drinking groups, but we see them pull together because to us, it's not just about the individual artist, which is very important, but it's about the individual artist reaching out, transdiscipline, cross-discipline, understanding process, respecting theirs, and learning from other artists. So we have groups who have their own Facebook pages. We have a jazz musician in Oakland that is now producing music for a Moroccan poet. We have had marriages. We might have been the reason for some divorces. We're not completely sure, but we know there is a closeness that happens and a vulnerability that only really happened to you in 7th grade when you went to Girl Scout camp, you know, and you told stories late at night. We urge people just to be and to drop the artifice that they need in the very busy worlds that they come from. And that is our orientation, is just take the time to respect the creative spirit inside you. And if we're successful at conveying that we really mean it, and an artist last month who at dinner at our house, we have them over before they leave, she goes, "You said you were going to leave us alone. You really meant it." She goes, "You're not here bugging me every day, asking me what I'm doing, asking how you can help me." People, we trust artists. We trust that they are so driven that we need not require anything from them. And I see that in you, and you're going to be perfect there. And I can't wait till you come.
I think artist residency centers are, their logic is the artist practice. If the artist practice requires the kind of place that Margot just described, which is really a fantastic place, and I've been on these retreats and they're wonderful, or if the artist practice requires something quite different, then residency centers that work with those artists have to be nimble enough to evolve as quickly as the artist practices are, because artists are really changing how their tools, how they approach the world, and what their worldview is quite quickly. So an organization needs to be fast on its feet. I want to talk to Marek for a second. First, what was the responsiveness here to your need to investigate whatever turn your research took? But second, and I think this is really important again, I want to ask this another way, I think the sense of location or place is extremely important for any residency and impacts the artist in residence. Arlisha is going to be really impacted by the beauty of the Santa Cruz Mountains and its beautiful isolation. But Alaska is a very unique environment. During the 5 years that we had United States artists come up here, virtually every one of them came back and said something to the effect that this residency had changed their lives and it was going to show up in their work somehow over the next year or two. So tell me a bit about the location, this location, how it's impacted you, and then again, the flexibility of this institution in assisting you with your research.
Can I speak without the microphone, because I feel like an old-fashioned Eastern European music?
Will you pick it up?
We need to use a microphone.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. I started working on this project, I'm talking about the climate project, in 2004. My first step was, after working with remote images, satellite images of Arctic landscape, I decided to actually come to Alaska. So my first time was here in 2005, and I actually traveled mostly in the south of Alaska, documenting glaciers and talking to people on locations. So for me, kind of felt like I'm making a big circle almost 10 years later, and feeling much more mature and feeling much more, obviously, older, but much more aware of complexity of those changes. And my focus over the years became much more, I'm still interested in the landscape, but I'm much more focusing on the people. I'm much more interested in kind of anthropological aspect of climate change and post-colonial theory. Being here, obviously, one cannot escape looking at those issues, looking about subsistence living, indigenous culture, oil development in the state over the last century, pretty much. So location was extremely important, and it's the complexity and the scale of the issue and the scale of the state, the place itself, it's overwhelming. So being outsider, coming here for 2 months and kind of then leaving and claiming that I know anything would be pretty stupid. So I don't know if I answered your question about location. In terms of the generosity of people here at the museum, but not only, because through people here I met hundreds of people, I believe, over 2 months in many different places. I went to AFN, I went to other places. So almost everybody was so willing to help, and sometimes I felt almost overwhelmed and so felt guilty. I grew up in a Catholic country, so it's easy. I mean, in particular case, I was working with the historical parkers, so it took us many days to actually pull them out, examine them, being able to decide which actually can work with them. And about 4 people was assisting me for a number of days and hours. And I constantly was apologetic about it, and people were saying, no, it's our job. That's what we do. We love that. And that was a beautiful experience.
I found the people here to be incredibly generous. I've traveled here, at least on 16, 17 different occasions. It does seem, though, that your, and this is fine, your understanding, or part of your understanding of this location has to do with an active principle, what's happening to this location. I had an experience where I was in Nome and I was speaking with a native Alaskan artist named Sylvester Ayek, who was an amazing guy, and he brought me out to the ocean where the seashore was, and he said, what's wrong with this picture? And I said, nothing's wrong. The water looks great, everything's fine. He said, what's wrong is there's supposed to be ice, and there's no ice, and this has been going on for some time. I said, well, how does that affect you? He says, well, I go out there and hunt, and those are my art supplies. I can't get any art supplies. And, you know, in that kind of wry way, he was saying things are really changing here, and Alaska is the front line where stuff is often seen first. It sounds as if this is a track you're following. You're up here in some way because you're seeing things or experiencing different approaches to the land, the use of the land, maybe the abuse of it, as something that's happening, you know, kind of on a first-line basis. Am I correct in that?
I think you are, but I kind of hesitate to talk about my practice because it's one of the many, many ways people work. So there's a lot of artists and creative people here in the audience, and people can go to residency to work on their continuing body of work, which might not necessarily respond to the landscape or place they are. So my way of working is very specific, but it's not the only way. And actually, I have really limited interest in visual arts. The only reason why I'm doing this is because I cannot write.
Julie, let me ask you something. You're from here. How does this location inform your work as a museum director?
Well, I think I addressed that a bit, but I think that's what's distinct about us. It's what's happening now. It's our place. The museum has a mission to collect, preserve, present the art, history, science, culture of the North. So professionally, it's embedded in what I do. It needs to be. But I think it's a huge opportunity for us to use our place to connect to other places. So we don't just need to look in an isolated, insulated way at ourselves as Alaskans, but we look at the North and with a much broader view and use that to connect not just to other northern places, but connect to Merrick, connect to the Antarctic, connect to desert locations, find the commonalities that to share ideas, resources, have some exchanges. So it's using place as and I keep saying an excuse because I think it is an excuse to connect ourselves to other places.
Well, all the residencies that you've been involved in have done exactly that. They've built bridges between Alaska or even Anchorage with the artists who are coming from other places. There have been ongoing collaborations and friendships. So I think one of the values of a residency program is that it's exactly as you say, it's a connector between different communities. But truly, all of the artists who've been up here have gone back to the United States or the lower United States, talked a lot about Alaska. It doesn't seem so far away anymore. People are much more aware of what's happening here in the arts community because you have people talking about it, people who are in a prominent position. And a fair amount of artists who would now like to come to Alaska and get involved in these programs. Let me switch. What's different, obviously, between different residencies is more urban residencies that are quite extroverted have a larger community that the artists embrace. There's also something to be cherished by your center, centers like that, that where just that community of artists who are at that site at that time develop a sense of community. Sense of community does not just happen by itself. You can set the stage, and it doesn't mean people are going to really get along or even have shared similar interests. I think it works out more often than not. But how do you add to or participate in this coming together of people other than the kind of setting the stage as you talked about? How do you get directly involved?
Directly involved.
Or gently.
Yeah,
directly
gently involved. I mean, I eat dinner with the artists 2 nights a week, and I watch changes. We also have 2 staff members who live on site who I think the personalities of those staff members are very important. They are working artists themselves, and so they exist to make sure the printer is running and make sure there's water and make sure all the needs are met so that there's a minimal interruption to the artists. I also think we try to set the vibe. Somebody said this to me, which was interesting, that they had gone to other residencies and ours didn't feel like they were being in competition with the other artist. There's not a lot of talk about who does your headshots and who your agent is. We really focus conversations around the work and not so much on past accomplishments, but a be here now kind of vibe in the place. And I think that we all, as staff members, try to do that. We have evaluations from artists every month. The staff sits down and says, okay, this isn't working, this is working, let's do that, let's change that. So we're constantly in a feedback loop that's based on artists' needs so that we will not get so hidebound about, oh, we do things this way. And I think that is important too, the flexibility to respond to what artists tell us. It happens even further upstream. We had 900 applications for next year. We just accepted 80. But I'm seeing that we need to be differently thinking about panel members to make sure there's a range of aesthetics on the different panelists, and even the panels themselves as artists are really changing boundaries and disciplines, and there's how do you differentiate a visual artist from a media artist from a new genre so that we can get the strongest panelist we get, so that we can get the best artists who are doing interesting work out there. So I think at every way in which we operate, we're operationally affirmative about being responsive to the field of people who are going to come and reside with us.
There are 2 ways, I think this is important to say, there are 2 ways that artists are selected. There's an open call, and there are many more numbers usually than people who are accepted. In all the panels I've sat on, though, it's usually based on the merit of the work, so it's very fair. The other manner is by nomination, and that's becoming more and more prevalent. It means, and to some extent, it's a closed shop. If you don't know the nominator and they're not interested in your work, you're not going to be nominated, and you don't have an opportunity that way. But it still has its own precision and intent to produce the best possible residency program. There are a couple of resources if you don't know about them. One is the Alliance of Artist Communities. Its website is artistcommunities.org. .org. And they list all of the residency centers in the United States and what their processes are in terms of selection, what kind of level of support, do they give stipends, do they pay for airfare, how long are the residencies, and what types of residencies they have. Another resource is called Res Artists, RESARTIS.org. This is the International Association of International Artists Residency Centers. It has a number of the same US-based organizations as members, as does the Alliance, but it is really based on hundreds and hundreds of fantastically interesting residencies around the world. And that's another resource to look at. And they tell you how to apply, and again, what the sources of support are. There's another one in the Netherlands called TransArtists, and I think it's transartists.nl. If I'm wrong, just Google it. It is an extensive database of about 1,200 artist residencies. Now, there are other avenues out there too. There are Southeast Asian residencies. There are inter-Asian networks. There's La Red Colección in Latin America. If you want a residency, you really can find one and get on it. I would just say you need to know why you want to go, but you need to know why that place. And that's why I keep stressing location. People who direct residency centers aren't looking for cultural tourists. They're looking for artists who are really motivated to do research, find themselves, perhaps produce work, but in an authentic way engage with the community that's hosting them. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about experiences you've heard about here in Alaska where communities really engage other artists.
I think instead, if I may, like to express an institutional perspective, which is that we often present residencies, and certainly we use this language as well, as an opportunity for artists to participate in what we do and what we're thinking about. And I think from my perspective, and from the museum perspective, it's a mutual opportunity. So I think it's, from a completely self-centered point of view, this is an incredible, exciting thing to be able to participate in as an arts administrator, as a curator, as a museum person, as an artist, to meet these people from around the world, to meet incredibly intelligent, critical thinking people with new ideas who bring new perspectives to us. So I think it's critical for the museum to be able to invite in these new ideas and perspectives, and it enriches what we do. We learn from it. I learn from it. Merrick is somebody I learned from, has changed the way I think about not just the residency program, but our experiences, the place we live in. He's somebody I hope to know until the end of my days. So these are important connections for us as individuals and as institutions. So I just want to make the point that the opportunity is very much mutual.
I'm deeply obliged. I totally agree. I believe this is a really exchange. I think it's on every level. It's not only exchange between the institutions, obviously it's exchange between the artists themselves. And I would really like to kind of stress diversity. You mentioned yourself number of residencies and locations. There is such a diversity of places, geographically, culturally, and the type of programs that almost everybody can find a place they can really appreciate and allow them to kind of grow and take advantage of this. And so this is why I said I kind of am hesitating to kind of present my example as a kind of leading example. It's one of many, many ways people work. And there are like places when actually the interdisciplinary collaboration is really stressed, which I really value. There are places which, expecting people to write specific projects, specific program, and then they will create the show, or they will leave some work behind. Number of international places. Over the years, I became more and more selective because I feel my life is getting shorter. So I go places when I really know I want to be there. But in some cases, people also should take a risk and go places which may have a little idea or understanding of it, and expose themselves and put themselves in a situation that unknown will happen, and that's also value.
In Marek's case, clearly residencies have been an important part of his career and his not only his professional but his creative development. And I've found that with other artists as well. It's a network that allows for that kind of close collaboration and exchange of knowledge that is often under the radar screen.
Can I respond to this just quickly? I think that historically we think about residency kind of terms of 20th century. If you look at actually history of art and you look at even medieval times, how much artists were traveling and how much it was impacting their style of way of working. For most of us, it's a relatively solitary act. I mean, we usually by ourselves, unless you're really engaged in community, but most of the time spent by yourself. The moment of when you have a chance to leave your studio and being exposed to new ideas, new places, which will automatically, most likely, cause some change in your work. I think that's value itself, and it's up to the future to decide if it was better or worse. But the change, I think, is good.
Last thing about evaluation. With the Rasmuson program, we evaluate at the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then 6 months later, after the residency is concluded, to see what's happened to the artist's ideas. Some of these things we've touched on. Did place make a difference? Did the practice they entered with sort of alter as they filtered through the residency? Has their worldview changed somehow, or was there no effect whatsoever? Most residencies do not do that 6 month to a year out evaluation. It's simply a capacity issue. They don't have the capacity to track and spend the time on that. But in this case, we're going to be doing that because it's extremely important data to an organization to find out that Arlisha or Marek, 6 months out, had a number of collaborations. Artists came to visit them. Artists started going back and forth. What is it that the residency spawned in a very positive way? And this is some of the most important data that isn't collected, because I've seen residency hundreds of times this happen, and this is really the kind of bridge building we talk about. It's not just semantics and empty words. We really develop ties between communities that are very strong.
I think all we asked Marek and the other artists to do this year was to come here or meet us elsewhere in the Arctic and not even have their research question in mind yet, but by the end of the time that they spent with us to then have their question. So we're investing in a long-term process and collaborating over a long period of time. Marek will come back, we hope, in January. We'll meet him in London for a conference on ice. And all the artists that we're working with this year will come back in August to make a presentation with the Institute of the North, which is a group of policymakers, business leaders, and it's an interesting chance to introduce the artists to those discussions. And at that same time, we'll have invited a new group of artists to participate in the program, so we'll have 10 people, 5 new ones interacting with the 5 old ones. And so over a 3-year period until 2016, we'll have worked with 10 artists, I hope for a substantive period of time enough for them to think about how this has affected their work and to develop bodies of work or partial bodies of work that relate to these ideas. And in 2016, we plan a major 7,500 square foot exhibition here at the Anchorage Museum that brings some of that work together, a major publication and an online exhibition so that people everywhere can access these ideas and some of the research. And then hopefully it doesn't end there. Hopefully those connections continue, the artists continue to communicate, we continue to interact with them, and we see where the program goes after that.
Okay, well, the last thing I'd like to say, it's sort of a shout out for the Rasmuson Foundation. There are a number of foundations now that are jumping in and starting their own residency programs. The one is the Cleveland Foundation. Rockefeller Bellagio has it. They're very hands-on. But what Rasmussen is doing is completely unique. No foundation before has set up this kind of widespread residency program where it's sending artists to different states and receiving artists and sending them all over Alaska. And this, if successful, and it is so far, is going to become a really interesting model in the foundation world, where there is a lot of pressure and advocacy for foundations to support artists again, because there's always discussions where their money should go. But I want to thank, in particular, Diane Kaplan and, of course, Jason Smart and Jeremy Pataki. We've done some great teamwork in moving this program forward a very short period of time. Jeremy, as program officer, is responsible for this, carried most of the weight on his shoulders. And it's been an amazing process for me to work with. And graduating out of this period with the United States artists, I think it's moving into a much more exciting period because of the reciprocity of the exchange. So I want to thank you, Jason, for really spearheading this and your belief in this program and seeing it through. The sugar daddy here is the Rasmussen Foundation, and you don't find many foundations like this. Usually they're saying no when you come to the door, but if you come to Rasmussen with a good idea, I know they're going to listen to it. So I think you all have a fantastic foundation in your midst. So that's it. Unless there's any more questions, we're going to sign off. It's 6 o'clock.
I'm just going to make a closing comment.
All right.
So I just wanted to say a tremendous thank you to all of our panelists and to Clayton for a very interesting conversation and really hitting in on the point of where the value comes in artist residency support. I wanted to be sure and just capture, to share with you and to mention of the organizations that are partners of this program, to specifically call out, in addition to Jurassic Resident Artist Center out of San Francisco and the Anchorage, in addition to the other lower 48 organizations involved, include the Zygote Press based in Cleveland, and McCall Center for Visual Art in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then a special partnership in Santa Fe, New Mexico, that includes the Santa Fe Art Institute and the Institute of American Indian Arts. So those organizations, those 5 organizations in the lower 48 states, are the formal partners of this new program. And then in Alaska, in addition to the Anchorage Museum, we have the Bunnell Street Art Center and the University of Alaska Fairbanks Native Arts Program and the Sitka Island Institute. So I just wanted to be sure to recognize all of those organizations as partners and the tremendous work that they've done in coming together to make this program possible. And then finally to say that there is information about the Rasmussen Foundation Artist Residency Program that's available on our website, and it includes information about all these organizations and the artists that are involved. So you can learn more information there. And for Alaska artists, for you to be aware, if this is a program that you're interested in potentially in the future, this program is presently open to Rasmussen Foundation Individual Artist Award recipients. And we'll extend an invitation next year for another cycle and an opportunity for Alaska artists to participate in this program. So please be thinking of that and encourage you to look at opportunities through the foundation to provide direct support for artists. So thanks again very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.